we're looking at the Middle English period. It's this massive, transformative era that literally built the road to the modern world. Our story starts with a huge cultural collision, the Norman Conquest, back in 1066. Imagine the shockwaves of that event. Overnight, the cultural landscape was totally turned on its head. English essentially became a peasant language for 300 years, while the new ruling elite spoke entirely in French. It set off a massive chain reaction in literature that we can honestly still feel today, as English furiously fought to reclaim its voice.
So, to make sense of this massive 400-year evolution, here's our roadmap. We're going to cover the Middle English era, break down its three shorter literary ages, look at the big themes of chivalry, religion, and romance, check out the birth of drama and poetic innovation, and finally, meet the trailblazing writers and works that started it all. Let's get into it.
Part 1. The Middle English Era, Setting the Stage.
Okay, let's take a macro-level look at an era that completely rewired a culture. It's pretty wild when you think about it. The English language basically survived underground after 1066. It fought its way back into the spotlight through the Age of Chaucer, around 1340 to 1400, and then pushed through what's known as the Barren Age, ending right on the edge of the Renaissance, around 1500. Despite all the intense political and social upheaval, English actually emerged as a pretty high standard of communication and literary art, even if, yeah, a lot of those old, really tricky spellings stuck around to haunt us. Moving on to Part 2, 3 shorter literary ages, breaking down 400 years. To make this massive chunk of history a bit more digestible, historians usually split it up into 3 distinct sub-ages. First up, the Anglo-Norman period, running from 1066 to 1340. This was heavily defined by that initial heavy blanket of French Norman influence over England. Next, we get this incredible burst of creative genius during the Age of Chaucer, from 1340 to 1400. This is the absolute peak of literary heights for the time. And then finally, things quiet down a bit as we enter the Barren Age, also known as the Dark Age, stretching from 1400 to right around 1485 or 1500. All right, Part 3. Chivalry, religion, and romance. The thematic bricks. So we've got the timeline down, but what were people actually obsessing over? What was capturing the public's imagination? Basically, 4 main features dominated the era: love, religion, chivalry, and the overall spirit of romance. And the thing is, these weren't just separate, disconnected ideas. Writers were constantly mashing them together. You'd get these epic stories of noble knights who were fighting not just for land, but for deep religious virtue and courtly love, all at the exact same time. Think of these intertwined concepts as the literal thematic bricks that authors used to build the sweeping stories of the next 4 centuries. Now, when it came to how these stories were told, poetry was the undeniable superstar. It was the absolute main genre of the entire period. If you had a story to tell, poetry was your go-to vehicle. But right alongside it, English prose was quietly stepping onto the stage and laying down a really vital, strong foundation. Why? Well, there was this growing, desperate need for translated religious texts and everyday administrative documents in a standard, readable dialect. People needed something to finally replace Latin and French for the everyday person.
Part 4. Drama and poetic innovation, the birth of entertainment.
It is honestly so cool to see the birth of what we consider modern stage entertainment happening right here. Stage drama didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It evolved through 3 very specific steps. It all kicked off with the mystery play. These were deeply tied to religious narratives, and fun fact, they were often performed on literal moving wagons right outside churches. From there, it evolved into the morality play, which basically personified good and evil to teach the audience a lesson. And finally, it morphed into the interlude. This was the crucial step that pushed theater out of the stuffy churchyards and into the rowdier, secular taverns and courtyards. It totally set the stage for professionals like Shakespeare to come in later and steal the show. But this era wasn't just innovating on the stage, it completely revolutionized the page, too. This is the period that gave us pentameter. That means 10 syllables or 5 metrical feet in every single line of poetry. It literally sounds like a heartbeat. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. It was a totally brilliant structural breakthrough that became the actual rhythmic heartbeat of English poetry moving forward. Now, you have to keep in mind that English writers weren't just working in some dark, isolated vacuum. They were looking outward. The great writers of this age were heavily influenced by the Italian masters. We're talking Dante, Petrarch, and Boccaccio. The English masters were essentially importing the Italian Renaissance right over their borders and fueling their own imaginations with these revolutionary new ideas and structures. Which brings us to part 5, trailblazing writers and works, the architects.
Let's finally meet the legendary trailblazers who actually penned the works that defined these centuries. First up is John Wycliffe, who lived from 1324 to 1384. This guy was an epic reformer of the English church, and he earned an incredibly powerful, almost superhero-level moniker, the Morning Star of the Reformation. He got this profound title for his tireless work in rooting out the anarchy and corruption that had deeply infected the priesthood at the time.
But beyond his massive reform work, Wycliffe is also celebrated as the absolute father of English prose. And he achieved this through one history-altering contribution. He translated the New Testament into English. This was huge. It wasn't just a religious victory, it actually standardized the English dialect across all these different regions, finally giving the common people a unified written language for the very first time.
Now, while Wycliffe was busy reforming the church and standardizing prose, we have another crucial architect capturing the deeply complex social spirit of the times, William Langland, who lived from 1332 to 1386.
Langland is immortalized for his towering masterpiece, Piers Plowman, and rather than just calling it a cornerstone text, it's really important to grasp what it actually is. It's this intricate, allegorical dream vision quest for the true Christian life. It brilliantly captures the intense religious and social struggles of the era, making it an absolute must-read window into the medieval mind.
But, to truly understand this English literary bridge, we have to look back at the guy who basically provided the blueprints, Dante, who lived from 1265 to 1321. He is universally known as the father of the Italian language and the supreme poet of Italy. His towering influence didn't just stay in Italy, though. It trickled all the way across Europe and heavily shaped the English literary mainstream.
Dante achieved this supreme status by writing the epic masterpiece, The Divine Comedy, famously kicking off that journey with the iconic first part, Inferno. But the real reason this matters so much for our story today is that Dante proved a local, common vernacular language could actually be used to write high art epics. He basically gave English writers the ultimate courage to elevate their own native tongue instead of feeling like they were forced to write exclusively in Latin.